Okay, we're recording. Dalton, we're here to talk about the current state of men in regards to dating and relationships. Where do you think the current dating landscape lies for men?
Honestly, I think it all kind of boils down to that three-pronged triangle of doom that is human instinct, which is gynocentrism, hypergamy, and neoteny. Because we've always, we as a species have always had this natural tendency of protect and provide for the women's because, propagation of the species and all that. Unfortunately, because of the unequal state of human rights currently, we've essentially let women's sense of hypergamy, which is the or the tendency of women to um, seek out the highest possible available mate for the reproductive act, and we've let that go so far afield that there's now this thing called the 80-20 rule, whereby 80% of women are after 20% of men, that being the most classically fit um, variety of men, whereas in men's case, you have the inverse, where you've got um, 20% of men essentially being the only ones allowed to have at 80% of women, and anyone else is considered below average, even though that's not how averages work. But let's get the hang of being human beings before we get the hang of basic math, I guess.
Yeah, um, I've definitely seen that, and I feel that it's only been exacerbated due to things like online dating and dating apps.
Yeah, because um it's essentially made the dating scene a buyer's market, whereby women have the right of first refusal in all cases, and men, both literally and metaphorically, can just get fucked and nobody bats a freaking eye.
I remember reading an article. Uh, it was about one of the dating sites. I forget which, but it basically did a breakdown where most of the men on the site found it was a 50 or 60% of the women to be attractive. However, most of the women on the site only found around 10-15% of the men to be attractive. I mean,
Yeah, the
forget
80-20
about
rule.
status and wealth and things like that. Just even their basic physical attractiveness has been cut down due to this hypergamy.
Yeah, because if we don't have to settle for average looking men, then why should we? Is sort of the instinctive route it goes. And in our Stone Age Paleolithic past and whatnot, um that served the human race well. It's why we have, all of the characteristics that differentiate us from all the other primates. But in a world with vast resources, safety nets, and of course the law skewed in such a way, um, it's it's kind of become a mouse utopia of doom.
I mean, I've abided by the axiom that you should try to improve yourself. If you know you having trouble getting a date, then you should turn yourself into someone that is more desirable. But there are certain things that a man can't do anything about. Like I've heard women complain that a man is not tall enough. I mean, height is an immutable characteristic. A guy can't change that.
Hmm.
What's the guy supposed to do then?
I guess develop genetic engineering to the point where they could do something about it. Maybe that's that's the most rational answer I could come up with to such a farcical state of affairs. But yeah, it's you're not tall enough, you're not strong enough, you're not rich enough, you're not symmetrical, and some of the criteria that this hypergamy has ballooned into is are just so fucking niche and particular that I don't think anyone can reasonably be expected to accomplish it, because even amongst the the high achievers, the 1% of 1% of guys that do on the surface fit all of women's criteria, their instinctive ones, aren't particularly kind or aren't particularly sensitive, because the very nature of hierarchy dictates that the ones that rise to that kind of 1% within 1% variety also occasionally happen to be sociopaths, narcissists, and other assorted pathologies of dickhead. And you often see that with the women that do get the high achiever. They'll whine and bitch and complain of, you're never around anymore, you don't engage with your children, or you don't see the kids often enough. I haven't, when was the last time you asked me about my needs? Yada yada yada. And then we wind up in the situation where even the women that are successful at this hypergamous game of chicken end up miserable anyway.
I mean, they seems like they would want a man who has all the wealth and status of a high achiever, but has the free time of someone who isn't a high achiever.
Yeah, they don't. I I think it's just an. And again, I don't want to ad hominem any women, because I don't think this is all women or even a large percentage of women or anything. I think it's just the nature of how society and human instinct interacts, basically. Um, I think it's just on some level they don't understand that in order to get it's essentially the same blind spot that lets feminists propose the patriarchy hypothesis. The idea that power is there solely for the person using the power, and not a means to the end of either helping other people or maintaining their own sense of security and sanity, which is what power is almost invariably used for, either to help uh, either other people or the propagation of the long-term interests of the person. Therefore, sacrifices are necessary, and those sacrifices are kind of the price of power. But they don't see the prices of the power; they just see the power. Essentially, is the problem.
So let me ask you: we've established that online dating is heavily skewed, but do you think online dating is better, or is it more worthwhile to try to meet somebody in real life? I mean, I know
I
it's a bit difficult now with a lot of places being shut down, which is
the
overall.
the corona-shaped elephant in the room there. Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. Fortunately for me, I can just opt out of all of this bullshit, because I am a guy who prefers other guys. But even then, that's a whole nother um, that's a whole nother Pandora's box of bullshit. Um, but I guess I guess again, it very much depends. Like, if you're in an area that's heavily populated, then I see no reason why you can't go out and pursue people the old-fashioned way. But if you're in a rural area, or as we just went over the coof, um, I I think online dating makes sense. I also think online dating is one of the cases of social media amplifying human tendencies to a possibly unhealthy degree, because when 50 years ago, when you were basically just limited to the people in your town or the people in your general area, and um the surrounding areas, or people you met along the way if you traveled enough, um now it's basically all of the available first world men and women at each other's disposal on these various dating apps, if you search far afield enough. So even if in previous eras a woman would have gone, all right, I've got a choice between maybe 100 to 500 people, and I'm gonna pick the best one of those. Now it's, I have a choice of 1 million people, so I'm gonna choose the best one of those, and I'm gonna shame and shun anyone who tells me that maybe I should calibrate my expectations accordingly or anything.
Personally, I prefer to date in person, I feel that it allows me to get a better understanding of them when we're face to face. And a lot of times, on dating apps, people can fudge the truth a bit about their physical appearance.
Everyone is cooler online, as the old country song goes.
Yeah, and you can get a better sense of the person. I feel that when you're talking to them, because there are also subtle nuances in human speech that can't really be conveyed over text.
Yeah, but even that barrier is kind of coming down. What with video calls, Zoom, even things like StreamYard and stuff. So I'm not sure how much longer even that's going to necessarily be an obstacle, and I'm not entirely sure that's going to be a good thing.
One advantage of online dating, though, is that there are a lot of different sites specifically calibrated to different kinds of people. So if you're looking specifically for one type of person, you'll most likely be able to find a site just for those types of people. Like, say, if you're looking for like other Black people or Christians or Jews or whatever, you can
Now,
find dating sites that cater to that.
insert your particular criteria here and go nuts, basically.
Yeah, I feel like that's an advantage.
Well, it's an advantage. It it's an advantage in the sense that it gives you a wider pool to pull from. It still doesn't really solve the problem for those who again might not be able to jump through all of the instinctive hoops, the height, the build, the wealth, etc. So therein lies the shadow of all of this, the sort of coin of MGTOWs on one side and incels on the other.
Yeah.
If you're in a small town and nobody wants you, you can just kind of chalk it up to, there's, I didn't have that many people to choose from, or maybe my person is on the other side of the world. But if you are doing online dating and you have all the available dating profiles that would fit your criteria, and still, it's like I can find 10 or 20 people a day who I like, why do none of them like me back? It becomes very much draining on the sense of self-worth, because we're white. One of the things that's kind of unique about human sexuality is we're very much desire based. One of the things that we find so alluring about romance and sex and love and attraction and all that business is we want to see ourselves be desired by someone who we in turn desire. It's so our mental capacity is so crucial to what defines our mating strategies as human beings. So if you find someone desirable and no one finds you desirable in return, that's going to weigh on your mind a little bit, especially what with the long-term effects of isolation, which I'm sure once again the corona issue is not doing anyone any favors on.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Personally, I've experienced some of that myself. Um, but you know, regarding the point you mentioned about desire, I mean, now with social media, women can get attention from thousands of different men who desire them, and so when they can get that, they really have no need to get attention from that one guy who may know them and genuinely like them when they can get adoration from you know hundreds of thousands of men from all over the planet. And
Yeah,
so
and if all their base needs are being met by, OnlyFans or whatever website they happen to be using and the users thereof, then they can kind of decouple once again from the I need my base needs met issue to go up the hypergamy ladder to, well, I very much like if Mark Zuckerberg or Brad Pitt just randomly showed up. I wonder if there's any people like that around.
you brought up OnlyFans. I just want to make this point very clear. Never, under any circumstances, date a woman who has an OnlyFans. I don't care how attractive she is. I don't care what she offers to do to you. Do not date a woman with an OnlyFans. It
Well,
is.
it's essentially a corollary to the old school adage of "do not stick your dick in crazy." And unfortunately, a person who can command an army's worth of attention at any given moment, no matter how sane and grounded they are to begin with, is going to go a little bit nuts. That's why we always were so careful about monarchs, because
They're almost
you give
certainly a
someone
narcissist to begin with
everything
as
they could
well.
ever conceivably want for free, and they go a little bit nuts.
I mean, if they're going to do that, they're almost certainly a narcissist to begin with.
Well, or made a narcissist by the circumstances, especially if it's one of those cases of like a woman who wasn't really considered attractive before she had an OnlyFans, finding out that there is a niche of people who find her very, very attractive. It's like a starving man in the desert all of a sudden being put in front of a banquet. He's going to gorge himself a little bit too much. It's just kind of how that works. Because again, human brains are wired to desire and wired to be desired, or to desire to be desired. And if you take desirability away from somebody, if you tell them you're worthless, you're shit, you'll never amount to anything, you're unattractive, you're this, you're that, you're the other, and then they find a niche of people who do find them desirable, who do find them attractive, it's kind of understandable that they would go a little bit nuts.
I
But
mean,
but that being said, they're still nuts, and you do not stick anything in crazy.
to me, OnlyFans ruins one of the most crucial parts of the relationship, and that is exclusivity. That she is only for you, and you are only for her, and that sexual part of herself is something that she shares only with you. To me, that's very important. I feel like OnlyFans ruins that because imagine how you would feel if you're dating someone and then you can walk in and a bunch of people come up to you because they saw your partner naked.
I don't know. The thing that I find personally quite insidious about OnlyFans is the false sense of intimacy. If anything, I don't necessarily have a problem with women selling their sexuality because, prostitution is the oldest profession for a reason, and it may very well be responsible for why we even have money in the first place.
Here's the
Um,
thing: if they want to do that, they can do that. I'm saying men should not date those
yeah,
women.
but I I'm of two minds on the whole like men shouldn't do that thing because of the simple fact that, like we said, there are men who are starving for even just the facsimile of affection, and I'd rather somebody who is that desperate for affection get an OnlyFans and at least sate their hunger on at least a facsimile of affection than I would have them go insane or experience the long term effects of isolation. It's kind of like how I don't have a problem with the idea of prostitutes offering the girlfriend experience because sometimes whether it's circumstances, whether it's just the person being undesirable, quote unquote, for any number of reasons or what have you. Sometimes that little spark of emotional validation can be the difference between having an all right day today or eating a bullet, or drinking a bottle of pills or whatever. So, um,
Yeah,
I,
I mean, I completely understand that. It's tragic, but my thing is that it's an, that the relationship is an illusion, and
yeah,
I would much
and that's also the problem that I have with it. It's because and the reason why I just went on that screed of kind of defending the simp is because so many people, when they look at OnlyFans, for some reason, and it's gynocentrism by a different name. It's we can't possibly blame the women for being manipulative cunts, if you'll pardon me, if you'll pardon the French. We have to blame the simp for trying to get the facsimile of affection from an outside source rather than an actual girlfriend. And I don't think that, especially not currently with, again, the and I hate to bring this up, but there is a differential in human rights, especially in this arena, uh, uh, between men and women, and nobody seems to care about men because, again, the triple threat of gynocentrism, hypergamy, and neoteny were wired to find women um, in need of protection, especially women that look vulnerable and innocent like children. So it can't possibly be that the beautiful, innocent young woman did anything wrong. It must be the poor, the cast-off shut-in whose only joy in life is that innocent young woman that is the problem somehow.
You know, I really do feel for these guys because a lot of them just get sucked in and they end up wasting a lot of their time. And like, people waste a lot of money on these things, like thousands and thousands of dollars. And some people like even put, supporting uh, whoever they're whoever they're subscribed to on OnlyFans over themselves. I mean, I saw this one post, I forget where it was, but this guy said that he was paying more in OnlyFans subscriptions than he was in rent.
But yeah, I again, it's all down to human instincts and the way human nature works. And I mean, to call back to yet another sort of psychological um perspective or point of view, this always calls to mind Harlow's monkeys to me. For those that aren't familiar, there was a study done by a psychiatrist named Harlow where they took two infant monkeys and they gave one monkey a surrogate mother who was a machine that was designed to be terrifying to that monkey, and they wired a food tube to that machine. And then they had another monkey whose mother surrogate machine was meant to be very nurturing and very protective, but without the food source supply. And what they found was the monkey tended to spend so much time with the comforting, nurturing mother, the affectionate mother, that it starved to death. Because in at least primate brains, love and affection and nurturing and the need to feel protected is very often or at least desired, is very often much more a higher need than even the base needs of food and food and water and shelter and shit. It's kind of bizarre the way we're wired. And when you throw in the human specific nature of, gynocentrism, i.e., wanting to get your desire mostly from either a mother or a significant female other, it kind of puts all this OnlyFans shit into perspective. If the last thing you have in this world is just an illusion of someone loving you, then you're going to pursue that at all costs because that's just what the nature of human beings is.
I just wish that people would wake up and actually pursue something that was real, because then you'll have not only actual tangible love with another human being, but they will want what's best for you. They won't want to see you, breaking your bank account every month to support them. They'll try and support you as well.
Hmm. Unfortunately, I think with the world as it is now, it's very difficult to convince um, convince people that that's the easier road because you do have the hypergamy problem. You do have the woman's market of dating a problem, and then you also have the um, nobody gives a fuck about men problem, which results in, your unsheltered homeless, your incels, your deadbeats, your disowned fathers, and every other thing. So like it's one of those caught between a rock and a hard place, and that's why I'm really really not hard on the OnlyFans thing, because if if that's the only thing standing between you and abject misery, you know, knock yourself out, man. I'm not gonna judge you, because even as an outsider, as somebody who mostly prefers dudes, I still get that loneliness feeling sometimes, and I have kind of an unhealthy addiction to romantic gay ASMR. Um, so I can't imagine what it would be like if I was straight and desired women, or if I was even more socially isolated than I currently am, God forbid. So yeah,
I mean, I don't think that the road I was talking about would be easy, but I do believe that in the end it would be what was best for them.
yeah. My objection is mostly just I don't think, for a lot of people at least, I don't think that's feasible in the current climate, and that's one of the reasons I consider myself a men's rights advocate, because I think a lot of the problem comes from the fact that we spent the last 100 years piling piling women as a whole with as many rights as we could give them as a society, and just kind of leaving men's rights exactly where they were for the last 500 years previous to that. So I think the best option for all parties involved would be, let's do for men in the coming century what we did for women in the last one, and then in a century or so, we'll basically have a utopia where everyone has reasonable rights and everyone is reasonably respected, and hopefully a much freer civilization.
One thing I want to talk about, we mentioned earlier about women holding men to a certain standard, but I think we should ask whether or not the women are good enough for
Yeah,
men,
that's
because you know
yeah.
you may not think that you're worthy of this girl, but you should also ask yourself, is she worthy of you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the last question on most people's minds, because again, we as a civilization and we as a species are raised by our mothers. They are our first experience of what it is to be human. And then those of us that are straight, not yeah, excluding myself, those of us that are straight are wired to get meaningful romantic attachment affection from women as well. So, in order to propagate the species in the Stone Age, that was useful. But now that we basically live in a world where most people can get their basic needs met, and the only laws that govern human necessity are those we ourselves put in place, it's sort of it's next to impossible to make a man think to himself, is this woman worthy of me? Because our culture, our civilization, and our instincts tell us by default the woman is better than me, therefore I need to earn her affection with provision, with affection, with basically everything I can manage, and then some, usually.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do this stream today, because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. People need to understand what they want in a partner, set those standards, and adhere to those standards. They don't. You
Yeah,
should lower yourself just because you feel lonely, or because you may find a woman very physically attractive, but she doesn't meet those
yeah,
standards. As a person, you think to
yeah.
yourself, "Ah, she's really attractive. I can overlook those other things." But you shouldn't, because in the end, even if you get with this woman that you find very attractive, if she doesn't, have the qualities that you actually desire, you're not going to be happy at the end.
Don't. don't let yourself be backed into a corner by the power of the woman card. And again, I'm perfectly aware that saying that is really rubbing a lot of people the wrong way and rubbing people's instincts the wrong way because again, we've been this way since before we left the freaking trees. But being that as it may, this needs to happen, especially given the or the century-long campaign we went on to give women as many rights and privileges as they could conceivably manage um, in the previous 100 years. Somebody needs to go, hold on. Women aren't inherently saints. Women aren't inherently valuable just for the sake of their womanhood. And what's more, and this is the tricky part, we need to stop viewing men as valuable only for their utility, their ability to protect, provide, and function, because that completely erases their emotional life, their intellectual life, and basically everything we define as personhood. And therein lies the problem. Instinctively, as a general rule, we see men as valuable for what they do and what they can provide, and we see women as valuable for their internal traits, for their internal sentimental value. And quite frankly, that's fine. And, again, we're wired to do that, but perhaps we should equalize this by seeing women's utility as more valuable and seeing men's personhood as more valuable.
I mean, I
Just,
do agree.
just a crazy thought, I guess.
I mean, I do believe that men should, try to work hard and provide as much as they can. But I feel like that as more of a responsibility. If you are in a relationship and you're trying to take care of the people that matter to you, that would just be something that you would want to do naturally.
Right, and it should be, and again, to clarify what I was saying, I'm saying that should be applied to everyone in the sense of it shouldn't be one person is the provider and the other person is simply provided for. It should be both parties doing as much as they can to provide for both parties, which
Yeah.
means seeing men's personal agent I almost made the same mistake. Um, their personal internal lives as more valuable because we classically see men essentially as appliances and we see women as value objects like Fabergé eggs and diamonds and crap. But if we trained ourselves as a species and as a civilization to see the utility and the personhood of both sexes to be valuable, then we would be off to the races rather than just seeing women's emotional vulnerabilities and personhood as valuable and just seeing man's utility, his, own personal life be hanged, which is very much what people in the past kind of ended up doing.
So, in your opinion, what are qualities that men should avoid when looking for a partner?
That's good. That's a good question. I don't really often have to think about this, because I am on the outside looking in, fortunately. But um, I think one of those qualities is um, one of those qualities that I think we should at least curtail to some degree amongst women is neediness without reciprocity, because that is basically the honey-do syndrome. The honey do this, honey do that, honey, make the yard look like this, make the house look like this, and so on. Um, Especially if she doesn't acknowledge your vulnerabilities. Again, avoid women who only see you as an appliance and a means to an end. If the person you are with, in either case, no matter what your gender or sex, If the person you are with cannot deal with it when you have a bad day, that is not a good relationship. And what's more, if the person you are with cannot support you to whatever degree you find reasonable when you have a bad day or you have an emotional crisis, then you need to seek companionship elsewhere. It's in all cases, I think that is the case.
A quality that I would find that is best avoided is materialism. Women who are only concerned about what they have and what you can provide for them rather than you as a person. This goes back to the hypergamy issue.
Yeah. Don't be with women who see you only as a fancy appliance or a wallet, basically, or an in-home security system. Be with women who see you as a man who has a life and desires of his own that can, you know, have a bad day sometimes, and that's okay. Also, I just want to point this out there because this is one of those trends that absolutely gets under my skin and annoys the fuck out of me. Don't be with a woman who would force you to put all your leisure stuff in a man cave. Just don't do it. And what's more, be with a woman if you can find one who shares your hobbies and interests, if at all possible. Because I cannot for the life of me understand why someone would choose to be with a person of any gender who would just go, you know, you having all those hobbies and interests and everything was interesting at first, but I'm over it. So you need to shut it all into one area, and I don't need to, it's where I don't need to look at it anymore. I'm sorry. When did this become an authoritarian dictatorship instead of a personal or emotional attachment between us? Like, yeah. So, yeah, if you're a guy who's a gamer, find women who play video games. They exist. You don't need to put away childish things, quote unquote. If those things make you happy, why the fuck would you be with someone who wants to take away things that make you happy? Ideally, you'd want to be with somebody you can share those interests with, because ideally, you'd be with someone who would be also made happy by those things. Because,
Absolutely agree.
yeah,
Absolutely agree. And another thing is, guys, you should find somebody who wants the same things out of the relationship as you do. Like, say, if you want kids, you should find somebody who also wants kids. If you want to get married, you should find somebody who also wants to get married. You don't want to be in a relationship where you're headed in two separate directions.
and I mean, there can be a little bit of wiggle room there. Like, you guys can wait a while before you decide, do we want to go through with this or not? But the long and the short of it is, ideally, you want a relationship that is going to be satisfying and mutually constructive for both of you as long as it can be. So why would you allow a relationship like that to start in a place where you're already compromising on fundamental things? Because again, not to be too much of a traditionalist, because people grow apart and it does happen and everything, but ideally, when you find someone to be in love with, most people would like it very much if that single person could satisfy them for their entire life. So, go into it with that in mind.
Absolutely. I feel like divorce has really destroyed the concept of death to us part in this modern day, because it used to be that there had to be a reason for the divorce, like abuse or just something, or infidelity. But now it's just people just don't want to get married anymore, and they're allowed to just split apart. Vows be damned.
See, the problem there, I think, though, isn't necessarily that divorce exists, because I do think people should have that option, even in cases where there isn't a like harm being committed between them. Because again, the way human psychology works is sometimes when the endorphins wear off, you get a little bit you get a little bit disappointed and everything. But the problem I see is problem number one. Why are you choosing to get married to a person after 5 months or 6 months or however long to begin with? And problem two, once those endorphins wear off, why is your first instinct, well, I guess we can't make this work ever? Um, I think the best option would be more selective to begin with, so that when the love high wears off, you're still with someone you can tolerate and you consider a life partner, ideally. Some again, this goes back to the whole don't don't put up with the man cave bullshit thing. And nor should you, as the man, be wanting her to shove all of her feminine stuff into a room or into a box when you're in a relationship with them. In either case, you should want somebody who has as much in common with you, or at the very least complements you in as many ways as possible, because you want this relationship to be as long as possible. Which means if you're making a long term investment, then you need to be more selective and be aware that you're making a long term investment to begin with rather than rushing in.
Yeah, that's why
Because
I
that's
feel.
just poor planning. I don't see divorce itself as a problem. I see the overabundance of divorce as a result of poor planning. So plan better is the long and the short of it, in my opinion.
Yes, I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with divorce. I mean, like I said, there are certain instances where it would be merited, but I just feel like the fact that it was made so easy, I mean that people can give up, you know, before they even really try to repair whatever damage is in the relationship. They just see divorce as an easy out. They don't necessarily put the work into, make the relationship work.
Well, again, I see that more as a problem of the start rather than the finish. I think there's a tendency to rush into relationships and rush to the highest degree of commitment, which we're all told is marriage. And that is the problem, because if a person took, you know, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, however long the relationship had to be beforehand, to work out all of those relationship kinks, to let the euphoria of, the endorphins and all the brain chemicals wear off first, and then chose to get married, I don't think the ease of divorce would be a problem, because people wouldn't need to use it. The problem is people rush into relationships prematurely to begin with, and therefore, in order to prevent either of them from blowing their brains out or being miserable for the rest of their lives, they have to get a divorce because they didn't plan ahead to begin with. As an example, a personal example, I have an aunt who was with her boyfriend for 6 years before they got married, to the point that when he finally popped the question to her, everyone in my family was just kind of like, well, that's okay. I, it did, it took you guys long enough. It was sort of like well, they've been together for so long, they're basically de facto married already. So what, why all the hullabaloo about the marriage? But they are among the most stable couple I have ever seen, specifically because they didn't think to get married until they were already 6 years into the relationship. So most of the post honeymoon blues and the you know difficult mark around the 2 year mark had already happened, and they had already gotten through it. So it was just sort of like, nah, it's the same as it ever was. We just now have this on paper, and there was a wedding at some point now.
I don't think I would want to wait that long before, asking somebody to marry me, but I would want to make sure that the foundation for the relationship is solid. And I think the best way to do that is, like we mentioned before, just looking for somebody from the outset who wants the same things that you do out of a relationship.
Yeah, and give it at least long enough that the high wears off, because we actually know more now about how sort of the biology of love and affection work in romantic settings. And what we found is the set of chemical reactions that occur when somebody falls in love, quote unquote, wear off around the 2 year mark, which is rather fortuitously or coincidentally, I don't think it's coincidence, I think it's just a reflection thereof, um, exactly when most young marriages struggle when they didn't plan ahead of time. So, yeah, step one is wait until the chemicals wear off, and when you can stand, if you can still stand each other for a decent period after that, then think about getting married, because then it probably won't end up in complete disaster. And this is the other sort of elephant in the room I want to bring up. Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, when you enter a romantic relationship, it is very often specifically to have someone to be vulnerable around. And if you're going to be sharing your deepest, darkest secrets with somebody, don't you want to make sure that that person is not going to turn around and completely eviscerate you as though you were a, person accused of witchcraft in the 1600s? Because that's the other ugly facet of divorce that needs to be addressed. So many people get into these quick and these sort of love 'em and leave 'em marriages, and then they find that the people that they were in a relationship with are complete dickheads and spend their waking lives doing nothing but abuse each other after that, because they broke the golden rule, you see. They stuck their dick in crazy. And there's a reason why sex was traditionally done behind closed doors. It's because not only are we wired to um, to focus on desire and desirability when we engage in romantic and sexual relationships, we also are wired to be vulnerable around the person we are pair bonded to. So if you do not trust this person to be vulnerable around, you should not be sticking your dick in them, or getting it stuck in you if you're a woman. Just don't, because if you don't want somebody to have the nuclear option of eviscerating everything you've ever loved or everything you've ever held dear, don't give them the fucking nuclear button to begin with. Don't tell them your deepest darkest secrets if you don't want that shit to come back and bite you in the ass. And if you don't trust the person not to completely destroy you with your deepest darkest secrets when you tell it to them, then you probably shouldn't tell it to them in the first place, which means don't get that intimate with them to begin with.
That brings up another point I want to talk about. Uh, Gentlemen, do not have kids with the women that you are unsure about, because in that situation you are bonded to them for life, and there's really not a whole lot you can do to escape them. And I've seen a lot of guys, people that I'm friends with, people that I'm related to, have kids with women that are absolutely terrible for them, and now they're basically stuck into a relationship with that woman for the rest of their lives. Either they are staying together for the sake of their children, or they split up, but they still have to deal with that person because they have a kid with them. Guys,
Mm-hmm.
just don't even think about having a kid unless it's somebody that you are absolutely sure that this is the person that you want to spend your life with and be the mother of your children. It's not worth it, not at all.
And here's the soulless pragmatic part of that argument. If you're having a kid with someone, that means that the resulting being, your child, the person you will probably love the most in the world, just based on how, again, human psychology works, is going to be half that other person. It's going to be half you and half that other person. So if you are stupid enough to stick your dick in crazy, then that means you are condemning your child, the continuation between you and the rest of human history, to be half a crazy person for the rest of their lives. Why would you? And I hate to sound all eugenic about it, but the reason we have these elaborate mating apparatuses is so we can produce the best possible offspring, and we care about our offspring by necessity. So why would you doom a extension of yourself, an extension of your life force, and the being you probably care most about in the world, to be inferior because you couldn't be selective enough about who you wanted to be with and who you wanted them to be part of? Because if half of your son or half of your daughter is an idiot or a cunt, then they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of being half idiot or half cunt the rest of their lives.
I
And
mean,
that
that's
sounds
just.
torturous and abusive to me. If it's damning a person's soul before they've even got a chance to make a choice of their own, basically.
I mean, think about it. That's just the nature part of it. There's also the nurture. I mean, would you want this person to be influencing the development of your child?
Yeah,
Because that's a whole nother can of worms right there.
yeah. If you don't want this person to have at least 50% of an impact on your child, and you don't want your child to be at least 50% undesirable person, then make like a eugenicist and social engineer. I know we all are very, very particular about social engineering and very skeptical of social engineering on a macro scale, but at least on a personal level, you have a chance to shape a human being's life, a human being that you by necessity should care a very great deal about. So why would you ruin a person's life before they've even gotten a chance to live it? That is my question. Make sure the person you are making in this process, if you make one, has their best possible chance of being a better person than you were. That's the desire of every parent. That especially if your desire as a parent is for them to be a better version of you, for them to pick up where you left off and do better than you started out with. Make sure that you give them the best possible chance to do that by not picking someone inferior to begin with, and making sure that however they will impact that child, it will be a positive or at least neutral impact. Please.
I mean, also, I feel like you shouldn't do it unless you're in a personal situation uh, to be able to have a child, because it's not gonna be a good situation for anybody where you have a kid and your personal life is a mess even before you have the child added into it. So you should try and make sure that at the very least your shit is in order before you
Yeah.
even think about having children with somebody.
Because any negative aspects of your life are going to impact that child unless you give it up for adoption or select a different family for it or something. Any negative impacts of your life are going to reflect on that child. And again, we as a species are very, very wired to be protective of children and be very, very negative when it comes to the idea of child abuse. So why would you abuse a child before they're even born? That is my question. Why would you abuse them by making them possibly genetically inferior? Why would you abuse them by making them possibly socially inferior before they've gotten a chance to make any meaningful choices of their own? And why would you subject a child to problems that you yourself find intolerable? That's the other question. Because that would be abusive.
All right. Do you have any more topics you'd like to discuss regarding relationships?
Not pertaining to like this general topic. I don't think.
Okay. I guess we can end it here then.
Yep.
Any last words or advice you want to say?
Creating a human life, either your own or the life of the offspring you hope to have someday, is your only tangible connection to the entire rest of human history. So be careful about that. It's a big freaking deal. Okay?
All right. Thanks, Don.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to end the broadcast.
Right.